It's one day I'm gonna have a video about confabulation. There's an awesome chapter in this book, the second chapter, on confabulation. Long story short, confabulation, confabulation is the act of coming up with a narrative or a justification or an explanation for a behavior, despite not actually knowing where the behavior came from, for an individual. So, for instance, the extreme case is somebody is cortically blind, meaning that their eyes function, but there's just nothing really to interpret the information because there's either a severed connection or a lesion maybe to the occipital lobe. And so because there's no interpretation of darkness or of the absence of light. And so sometimes people who are cortically blind won't believe that they are blind. And then the doctor will be like, oh, okay, well then walk towards me. And they'll stumble. The doctor will be like, why'd you stumble? I thought you weren't blind. They'll say, oh, you just moved that thing in front of me. So that's confabulation. Okay. But the reason it's a long chapter in this book written for the general public called You Are Not So Smart is because it isn't just people with the back of their brains missing that do this. The brain does it constantly as a part of a lot of natural and proper functioning processes. So for instance, I don't think it was that chapter, I think it was something else that I shared with you guys, one of the videos. Oh, the Wizard of I. I spelled capital I. I mean spelled I, not E-Y-E. But in it, he talks about how the eyes, when they move from one point to another, rather than sending the blurry images that it's receiving as it moves, it sends no information, and the brain fills in the gap with what we were just looking at and also with what we anticipate seeing. Oh wait, is that not an example of confabulation actually? The point is that whether it's a part of the brain just like filling in a gap of information with some other information, or whether it's the brain coming up with an explanation where there's a gap in our explanation. In any case, that's what we're talking about here. Okay, so I thought of something really neat. When I've been in Europe, I have dated a couple of people. Two people come to mind who, let's say one person who was fluent in English, but when we would be discussing sort of higher level things, she would say that she understood, but just couldn't find the words. And I believed her. It took a while to realize, oh no, I don't think she actually understands. See, here's the thing though. She's confabulating. She really does believe that she understands. And then what she does, not intentionally, but what a part of her does, she is her brain, right? What a part of her does is goes, we're having trouble participating in the conversation. Yeah, it's because English wasn't our first language, so that's it. I had another person who we were speaking in French, and French was her first language, so she couldn't use that one. So she said, oh, I just, shut down and have trouble expressing things. Never got a really clear answer on whether there were actually things happening. Another one is, I remember when I was in school, you would have kids that would either get called on or for some reason would need to respond to something or need to explain something. And there were certain people that would just so consistently say, I can't figure out how to say it, but yeah, I know the answer. I'm just having trouble figuring out how to say it. And I believe all of them believe it. All of them. But we can't possibly know if it's true because you don't actually know what is happening in you. And then, so anyway, you're not even going to believe. I'm not even trying to convince you of confabulation. But anybody who does understand that confabulation happens and stuff, and that it's a default method of making the world make sense and interacting with other people, it's just a neat application of that understanding to realize that all those people who were saying, oh yeah, no, I totally understand, just not quite sure how to, just can't quite think of the right words, and then sometimes they'll put words on and those words are wrong, and you'll say, okay, but that's wrong, like that's not the idea, and they'll say, yeah, no, I misspoke. Oh yeah, that's the one you would hear a lot in school, and I hear it a lot in conversations with people, is I misspoke, but I do get it, you know what I mean. Sometimes people do misspeak, right? But if you recognize that you misspoke, when I recognize that I misspoke, I'm able to make the change. Or often it's not misspeaking. So I'll say something. Of course, hey, listen, everything I'm doing right now might be confabulation. I might be absolutely lying to you and have no idea. But often, if I say something that doesn't match reality, I hope that I say, oh, okay, that was wrong. Sometimes I'll say, oh, no, you're right, I messed up, I misspoke. And then sometimes I'll catch myself and say, no, actually I didn't misspeak, that was wrong. But no, I do understand, and then I'll be able to demonstrate the understanding. But there's a lot of people, it's not my first language, which can sometimes be the case. But I promise you, the first example I was giving was fluent. And yes, obviously higher level things sometimes require a certain vocabulary, right? But there was no point where she was going, hey, you're using some high level vocabulary, what does that mean, right? So he was like, oh yeah, I'm totally following. So comprehension, she was able to follow, but wasn't, even in simple words, able to engage with the material. We're not saying that she would need to use to reference the ideas. You can talk about the relationship between ideas without using the actual names of the ideas. Okay, anyway. So just, if you take anything away from this, and you're a person who has often heard people say, oh, I misspoke, but you know what I mean, or, but I do understand, even though what they said, like, dramatically differs from what an understanding would look like. People who say, like, I can't think of the right words because I don't speak that language well enough, or because they're just not coming to me right now, or because I'm just feeling shy, or whatever. Hey, don't give them the benefit of the doubt in the sense that, like, believe, because then that's how you end up in, like, a year-long romantic relationship, only to slowly discover, oh, it's not that they just are having trouble verbally engaging with the material. But do, understand they're not lying to you. They really do 100% sort of believe that, as much as a brain believes something. And yeah, don't fight them on it, I guess. But if that relationship's important, I guess we're going to have to figure out some way to get to the bottom of it, figure out whether it's actually a case of articulation, or whether the person thinks it's a case of articulation, of expression, but actually they don't have the important stuff. For that, and that's no big deal. It's okay if somebody's smarter than you, okay? It's okay if you can't you don't really understand. And maybe you don't feel like you understand, because as I've said in the past, the brain has no sensor for understanding. It just has a sensor for confusion. So when that sensor's not going off, it just assumes it understands. And so, that's okay. They believe they understand. Nothing that you're saying is particularly confusing them. Okay, if you ask them, hey, that word I use, what does that mean? Or, hey, so you can imagine what the implications of that would be. They'll just draw a blank, probably switch to, why don't you just tell me? Anyway, so my point was, just be understanding that they really do believe that, and through conversation, you might not quickly be able to figure out, what the truth is.